Allow me to introduce you guys to S.T.A.L.K.E.R, a series that holds an incredibly important place in my heart. A franchise that would forever change the way I look at video games, but more importantly, it was a gateway through which I experienced one of the richest and most fully realized fictional worlds ever created.
This was my first time playing it, and I thought it was fantastic. I would recommend S.T.A.L.K.E.R if you don't mind a challenge, some frustration, some jank, some things that are admittedly underdeveloped, missing, broken, and occasionally downright unfair. You're gonna have to be okay with that reality. But I'm telling you that even with all of that, it's still immensely charming.
S.T.A.L.K.E.R has rekindled a rare sense of wonder and danger that so many games lack today. You just don't see it.
This is S.T.A.L.K.E.R. A lot of people consider it to be a cult classic, with good reason too. It's pretty compelling. The thing is, I've heard an equal amount of people trashing this game and loving it. It's easy to see why it's treasured when there's many moments like these. Even with its messy side mission system and all of its technical blunders, Shadow of Chernobyl is still one of my favorite shooters. The setting and survival gameplay keep it going even 10 years later, even when the survival parts do sort of drop off at the end. And hey, if you're not too sure on the game itself, there's about 10 million mods to try out. Modders are still developing for this game, and with good reason. It's fantastic.
S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow of Chernobyl is one of the greatest games ever made. Its atmosphere, unmatched. Firefights, incredibly intense. Sitting around a campfire drunk while someone strums a guitar, pure bliss.
So that's why I encourage you to play S.T.A.L.K.E.R for yourself, because your experience is almost guaranteed to be different than mine.
Good day, fellow gamers, and welcome to my critique of S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow of Chernobyl. As the title suggests, I'll go into great detail about S.T.A.L.K.E.R, from the gunplay, looting mechanics, stealth, and the story. As previously said, this is a critique, so I will be very harsh to this game. So if you don't like that sort of thing, you're free to not watch it. But if you don't care about that, then carry on. S.T.A.L.K.E.R is a game that has met tons of praise, from YouTubers, Steam, and Metacritic with a score of 8.4, along with some sequels. S.T.A.L.K.E.R has been praised over and over again, and I legit cannot understand how this game became so popular and still receives so much praise after all these years. So hopefully you can come out of this video with a new mind or perspective on it. If you haven't played S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow of Chernobyl, I advise you not to play it. I'm serious. And if you do play it, then good luck. S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow of Chernobyl is a first-person shooter survival horror open world game that came out in 2007. To give you an idea, BioShock, Assassin's Creed, God of War, Portal, and Halo 3 all came out in 2007. If you didn't know yet? Yeah, me too. Anyway, this was done by a small studio based in Ukraine. While some consider this game to have not aged all that well, I would disagree with those people. Because S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow of Chernobyl was never a good game to begin with. I am very serious when I say this. This game is just not very good, and it seems a good amount of people have either brainwashed themselves into thinking it's a good game, or they haven't played the game at all. I say this because there are videos out there that review S.T.A.L.K.E.R that don't even play the game without mods. And the reason I bring this up is because I don't want to hear anything from anyone telling me I should mod the game in order to have a fun time. I'm not one to think that you should mod games in order to have fun. If any game doesn't work because of the developers, it is their job to fix it so you can play it, and if the base game is better because of a mod, then you should only play it after experiencing it once. It should not be used as an excuse to fix the game. Now that is over with, let's look at the actual game. When it came down to guns, I had to rewrite and play the game over again just to make sure I wasn't going crazy. And after giving it plenty of time to think about it while reviewing my footage, I finally came to a conclusion. Guns in S.T.A.L.K.E.R are very inconsistent. Some are slightly more consistent than others, and the rest work pretty much all the time. Keep in mind that this is not my subjective opinion, this is very much a fact, and I will proceed to show it to you in this footage. Now, sadly, I didn't get footage of every gun in the game. This is because when I finally got the idea, it was a little late. But regardless of that, let's see what I mean. Now, for this example, you're seeing me shooting at a wall with an IL-86. Now, this gun doesn't have the best durability, but it does have a pretty high accuracy meter compared to a lot of guns in the game. However, that's not what really matters here. What matters here is the footage you're seeing right now. I decided to do this inside a lab because it's dark, and I can actually see where my bullets are landing. Not to mention, I can do this at a pretty decent distance while crouching. If you don't know why this is important, don't worry, I will explain soon. In any case, you can see how some of the bullets are pretty much going nowhere close to where I'm aiming. And this gets worse as I go further away from the wall. I keep shooting and shooting, and what you see are the results. Now, what does this tell you? Well, to me, it tells me everything I need to know about the shooting in this game, and why it's so incredibly inconsistent. You see, my dear viewer, there's a lot of information around the shooting mechanics of S.T.A.L.K.E.R, Shadow of Chernobyl, and at first I wasn't sure of what was going on. However, upon looking for information online and playing the game over again, I now know for a fact how it works. I noticed three things that do make a difference when it comes to the shooting. That being the weapon itself, crouching and aiming with left click all give you bonuses to accuracy of the bullets. The reason I need to confirm this information is to bring a closure to this debate once and for all. And as said before, the conclusion was actually simple. Crouching and aiming with a sight might make a difference. I say might because it really does not matter. What really matters is the gun I'm using. That's it. No, I'm not joking. After playing this game 4 times, I can for a fact tell you that your accuracy is determined by the gun itself and the distance of said gun. Since the closer you are, the bullets don't have time to spread as much. This is why guns that have very fast bullets seem to be somewhat more accurate than guns that have better accuracy in stats. But again, those don't matter as much as the gun itself. I'm gonna show you in a very confident manner that this is the case, because the only guns that seem to work almost all the time are the sniper rifle, the Gauss rifle, and the FT200M. I say almost because I thought the weapons were 100% accurate until I went back into my footage and I noticed some of our sniper shots missed for some reason. Now this happens rarely, but the fact that it happened at all is quite shocking. But yes, that is the biggest issue of this game. Guns have a very odd problem where if you shoot at a target, have a chance of flying so far away that it misses the mark completely. Some people seem to think that this only happens at the beginning of the game, but as you can see, that is not true at all. Every weapon can miss, but only a few of them are much more consistent than the others. Regardless, if you are shooting at the hip or aiming with a sight, they are far more consistent than every other weapon, and they are only available late game. You can get a sniper pretty much right before you get to the brain scorcher, which by that point you have beaten 75% of the game itself. Not to mention you can only buy ammo for it by doing quests of the factions, something of which I didn't know or bother until my 3rd run. The Gauss and the FT200M are both endgame weapons that can be obtained at the final level, and so you the player are at the mercy of every other weapon, which is to say they are far less accurate than these are. Here's some more footage for you to understand my argument even further. In this example, I use a very simple handgun, the kind of handgun you start the game with. And so as you can clearly see, the gun for the most part was somewhat accurate, even at a little distance. However, just like before, the moment you take some distance from the target, it seems like less accurate. No matter how hard you try, no matter how much you crouch or aim, the game will roll a dice that says a bullet is actually shooting where you are aiming at. It sadly does not matter what weapons do this board consistently, since most of them work the same. Here's another example with the shotgun, although it was a bit inconclusive. This is an example of me using an SMG. And finally, the AK-74. As said before, I don't have footage of every weapon shooting at a wall, but by now you understand my point. Every weapon you use is more consistent the closer you are, and then the further you get, even the great AK-74 will miss from time to time. And bear in mind, a lot of the encounters in this game are not this close. Now that we have established this, I will show you some footage, every miss I could find. This footage was taken from my master difficulty run. I ended up with about 23 minutes with examples of my bullets missing, and to be honest, I did not take footage of every counter, and I for sure missed a few minutes of it. But still, the fact is that no matter what, my guns will find a way to miss. Some might miss a little more than others, but the point I'm getting here is how guns are so inconsistent that you can only rely on endgame weapons to be accurate. There's also a lot of misinformation regarding accuracy when it comes to reviews of the game. For starters, some people say that the only way to play the game is to do on master difficulty. This kind of comment has been proven to be complete bullshit. I'm not sure when this myth started, but finding myself beating the game 3 times, one of them in master difficulty, I can assure you for a fact that it is very much a myth. It is also to my belief that crouching might give you a little boost in accuracy, but only a little. Your bullets can still be far off. One thing I noticed while playing is that even if you take your shooting stance to fire an enemy, if you are too far away from them, you will not be able to hit them, no matter how accurate you are. This is something that the game doesn't really explain to you, nor does it show you how can this make a difference. Here's an example of it. As you can see, I'm shooting an enemy far away. However, despite the fact I should be accurate enough, I have a very hard time shooting him. And this example right here shows how broken accuracy is in this game. It doesn't help that the handgun's aiming is awful and I can't tell where the fuck I'm shooting unless I have an actual sight. And even if I'm using a sight, I have to hope I don't die since I can't see my health, which is another issue with the game. Accuracy matters a lot in S.T.A.L.K.E.R, especially when it comes to headshots. When you can't rely on it, there's something wrong with your game. Every bullet you shoot, no matter how accurate you are, will have a chance of not going the intended path, and there's nothing you can do about it. Besides maybe modding it, which at that point is a different game. Accuracy is the bread and butter of shooter games, and S.T.A.L.K.E.R found a way to make it as frustrating and unfair as possible. God forbid I shoot a gun and it actually works the way it does in other games. Not to mention, since S.T.A.L.K.E.R is harder than your average shooter, you will find yourself dead, because the coating of S.T.A.L.K.E.R was made on styrofoam. Another reason why the accuracy matters so much is ammo. You want to spare as much ammo as possible in most games. While you will be having too much issue with this in S.T.A.L.K.E.R, you can eventually run out in certain situations if not prepared. You want to take the enemies down faster by shooting them in the head, since it does a lot of damage even one shotting them. However, due to the mechanics of the game, this isn't just viable for most of it, at least until the end. And due to the player always constantly shooting a lot, they will waste ammo much faster. I would recommend you to go for headshots until you get a sniper rifle, because going for the head is far too inconsistent to be worth it. The enemy will also have a hard time shooting you from afar, but unlike you, they have infinite ammo. They will keep shooting and eventually get a few lucky shots. In some instances, your luck will run out and kill you in a second, even if you are behind cover. Their environment doesn't help on this matter either, since it can get in the way of your sight, with bushes and trees. But the enemy doesn't care. On a quick note, how about grenades? They're terrible and unreliable, seriously. Before you say anything, no. The gunplay is not realistic or immersive. There's nothing realistic about a shotgun not pulverizing my enemy that is 2 feet in front of me. There's nothing realistic about a group of enemies who all have telepathy and know your location at all times. There's a reason why games like this are frowned upon. It's just not much fun to play a game where you die in an instant and can't even guarantee the same for your enemy. Despite the fact that the game encourages you to crouch and aim, S.T.A.L.K.E.R will only make this easier by coming in closer to the enemy. Some people seem to think this is a good thing, and I happen to disagree very hard with those people. While yes, the game encourages to push further into the enemy, pushing ahead is actually not great unless you happen to know where the enemy is. A lot of the time, you will try to be at a safe distance, just like in the example you saw, and you will not be able to shoot them, especially at the beginning of the game, where weapons are at their worst. This is also why I heavily dislike difficulty in this game, since whenever an enemy shoots at you, even if you are wearing very good armor, they can shred you of all your life in a second or two. This is so bad in master difficulty that when you die, your health bar still hasn't catch up to that fact. You might think that dying so fast is because of master difficulty, but I can assure you that this is not the case. This is just how the game works. S.T.A.L.K.E.R is meant to be a hard game, which can be understandable. However, I don't think S.T.A.L.K.E.R knows how to make a difficult game. As mentioned before, you have to get close and how close really depends because I legit cannot tell. Sometimes I would shoot an enemy point blank with a shotgun and it wouldn't kill them. Other times I shoot them in the head and it didn't get them either, despite me very clearly getting them. I just don't know why this happens, and since you have to take a leap into enemy fire, you are always at risk of getting shot. Even if you manage to get close and take cover, they will flank you from another angle, and what do you expect me to do at that point? By the time I realize they shoot at me, and I'm dead. If I decide to run and shoot at the enemy, I have to hope that I don't go down, and hopefully I can heal or take cover before they can down me. On my 4th playthrough, I noticed a lack of death, but that was more due to me being too experienced at the game, and even so, I ended up dying more than a few times. The game wants you to take it slow, except you can't do that since you have to rush the enemies. You however have to be very careful while rushing, especially in areas where there's a ton of them. A good example of this is the military mission, since you will be surrounded by them quite easily, and you have to push forward or wait for them to get close, and neither is much for an option. Now this is not impossible by any means, that's not what I'm getting at here. What I want you to understand is how a game where you can get gunned down so easily can also encourage you to get close to enemies, only for you to get flanked. You receive so much damage constantly that you have to heal pretty much immediately. This is something that by the 3rd playthrough, I figured out. However, before that I never used quick healing, and sadly this just isn't all that intuitive. You also need to keep in mind that sometimes the enemy will just wait for you in certain corners, and might never move from them until you see them face to face. I know this because more than once it happened, that I will be running all the wiser to the next level, and all of a sudden boom, there's an enemy there. And even if you try to shoot at it, it's too late. The enemy shoots you too fast for you to kill it. This is especially bad in Master Mode, where your health goes down even faster, even with the best armor in the game. Take a few seconds of this hallway as an example. All the things combined, you can see how a new player with little experience and knowledge of S.T.A.L.K.E.R will start the game, not understand why sometimes it seems like he's not shooting at anything, and when he tries from a safe distance the bullets go nowhere. S.T.A.L.K.E.R's difficulty is just like the shooting, it is laughably bad, and some people seem to think that it gets better as you go on, but as proven before, it doesn't get better. You just have weapons that do more damage, and the player probably doesn't realize that most of the shooting that kills enemies is actually done with assault weapons, since they spray the enemies with bullets, making them much more effective. There's a reason most of my montage has been missing even with sights, because I'm actually aiming for headshots, and since they are a smaller target than the body, it's only natural. You happen to get a pretty good modified AK-74 early on that does this very effectively. Because of this, you cannot rely on the initial guns, there are handguns and shotguns, the latter which is made worse by the fact that it sucks balls at killing enemies. Many times it wouldn't get an enemy down even after shooting it twice. And mind you, this is how you start the game. Making a good impression is very important. Sometimes the AI is at disadvantage, but I don't think it was intentional. You wait for the enemy to get closer through the door on whatever you are, and then you shoot them in the head. This is one of the examples where they try to portray the AI as something smart, but sadly it does the opposite. The way they camp on the player is just infuriating, and no, it's not realistic because the AI is completely silent, unlike you, so tough luck, buddy. You react to an enemy just hanging out in the door, but just barely not manage to shoot him? Tough luck should have seen the future. Already mentioned it, but grenades are worthless, and the AI reacts so fast that they're just not worth the trouble. Monsters can be pretty deadly, but this depends on your weapon. There are times where I would dump all my ammo and they would still live. This doesn't sound so bad until you have to reload and they have a chance to kill you. Thankfully they stop being a threat after 50% of the game is done, but they are quite annoying. Sometimes they would just spam attacks, and even if you walk away from them, you will die pretty fast, so you had to be extra aggressive. A good example is this enemy that attacks your mind. He sucks ass. If you see him coming, he has a chance to wipe you out, unless you attack him to make it stop. Especially since this attack, for whatever reason, drops your gun, and he just hits you back to back, giving you so little window to attack that you will die unless you manage to just barely shoot him. So to summarize, enemy difficulty boils down to you rushing in so you can actually shoot at the enemy, making sure the enemy doesn't come too close, and flank you. Hopefully you have some cover that doesn't suck. Kill the enemy before they can kill you. Hopefully your gun works. And if the enemy is in a too far location, don't get you. Sometimes the enemy has such a good location to you that even if it looks like they're not looking at you, they can one-shot you as soon as you shoot at them. And in some cases the enemies are designed so you have to shoot them in the head. And since you're always getting shot, your armor will slowly get worse and you can't repair it. You have to find another one. Hopefully you do find one. Enemies can also stand still even if you are in front of them. Sometimes they never stop moving, making you able to shoot them just very annoying. They can also crouch, but it makes no difference, but they can sometimes even shoot through walls. You can sometimes shoot at an enemy, stun them, but run out of ammo, making you reload and then you die. If all of this sounds frustrating, that's because it is. S.T.A.L.K.E.R, especially at the beginning, is not fun, and while some like to argue that it's only for the first part, this is just not true. The shooting and enemy damage is an issue no matter the difficulty or level. Here is some footage where I show you the difference in damage from Master difficulty to S.T.A.L.K.E.R difficulty, which is normal difficulty. You see, in this footage you see right now, I decided to take damage on purpose, and by doing so, I will see how fast I will die. Now, unfortunately this wasn't all that conclusive, but regardless, enemies drain your health so fast, it makes very little difference. In S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow of Chernobyl, you have W saves in order to be able to actually beat the game, because otherwise it will take a lot longer, that is if you can beat it. This is going to be short, and this is due to the fact that stealth is basically non-existent in S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow of Chernobyl. Now don't misunderstand me, it's not like you can't sneak your way into certain levels. There's videos out there after all. But that's not what I am referring. You see, in Stalker, killing an enemy is impossible to do undetected. This is because of the way the AI works. You see, once you take down an enemy in a level, every single one of them will proceed to know your location, regardless of how well you are hidden. Even if you took that enemy down undetected, it doesn't matter, you are now a target and the enemy has X-ray vision. So yeah, stealth just isn't much of an option in Stalker. Funny thing is that the game gives you some binoculars, infinite bolts, and even a sound and sight bar. While they clearly wanted to create stealth, they failed so hard that you never end up using the binoculars or the bolts, and once you realize those bars at the left are meaningless, you stop paying attention to them. Some people like to call this game an open world game. I would like to know what those people are smoking. An open world game is basically giving you the option to explore, to go out of your way to get lost, or to simply not follow what could be the main path. Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl is not an open world game, and I have no idea why people think it is. The way the game is structured is pretty simple. You start in this area named Condor, which is basically your tutorial level. Not much to do in this one, besides a few main quests and optionals here and there. Once you have done your first main quest, you make your way up to Garbage. To the left of Garbage, Agroprom is located, and that's where you go next. Once you go to the bar, afterwards you go back to Garbage, into the right side, also known as Dark Valley. Now, what I'm trying to make you understand here is simple. Stalker is actually very linear, and this isn't up to debate, by the way. The game was designed with the intention of the player always getting close to the center, which in your case is just going up and up until you reach the final level. That is the nuclear power plant. There are no optional areas either. You have to go to every level in the game, even if they aren't in your path at the time, just like Dark Valley is. The game needs filler after all. There's also a decent amount of backtracking, but really this is one of the least bothersome things about Stalker compared to the rest. Before we get to anomalies, design, and atmosphere, let's talk about loot real quick. You see, in Stalker, loot works in a very bizarre way. I'm not sure why it was designed like this. Let me ask you something. How do you think loot works normally in a game? You don't actually have to answer, by the way. Now, the answer to this should be very simple. You find loot from enemies, containers, chests, and so on. You find loot like that in most games. However, Stalker decided to be different. It works like this. You see, every time you inspect a corpse, whatever that corpse is something you just killed or not, doesn't matter. That corpse will proceed to give you a PDA entry that will tell you where exactly you can find some loot. This is how loot works in Stalker. You might be confused why this is a bad thing, but that's the funny part. It shouldn't be a bad thing. The reason why this is such a bizarre way of implementing loot is simple. You see, if you get a PDA entry, a location for loot will appear on the map. But if you go to said location before you get the PDA entry, you would not find the loot. That's right, this is what I like to call Schrodinger's loot, where you can only find said loot if the game tells you that it exists. Because of this, there's basically no point to ever examine containers and other shady locations, besides maybe one or two exceptions. For whatever reason, the developers did not want you to explore and examine the very obvious containers with awesome loot, so they decided to withhold you the goods until you find a specific PDA entry telling you all about it. This is a really silly way of doing loot, and I legit don't know why they did this. This pretty much forces the player to only explore where you want them to, and when you want to. But that's not the only loot you get. After killing an enemy, they always drop something, that be it ammo that they were using, guns, food, or healing items. These are all random, and you pretty much have to always loot to keep yourself alive. Enemies will also drop the weapons they were using, but most of the time you have to pick them up yourself instead of going to their inventory. There's nothing wrong with it, but I do wonder why didn't you just put them inside the corpses like the rest of the loot. Now let's get into the main dish, that is anomalies, or as I like to call them, annoying death traps. Because that's pretty much what they are. Anomalies are one of the unique things in S.T.A.L.K.E.R. When I first heard on anomalies, I thought they were created due to the radiation, since, well, it takes place in Chernobyl. However, later you'll learn that radiation has pretty much nothing to do with it. In S.T.A.L.K.E.R, the most common anomalies you will see are burner, electro, springboard, vortex, and fruit punch. They are what you expect. If you get close to one, expect to suffer lots of damage. Like burner, for example, if you get close to it, it will burn you to a crisp. So now you get the idea of anomalies. They are obstacles in your way that you must avoid. There's not really much to them, besides the fact that apparently they can give you artifacts, but I don't know how, nor do I care to find out. As said before, they are more annoying than anything else, and they are also very easy to spot unless you are somewhat blind. Anomalies sound a lot cooler than they actually are. They are always in a small patch area and all over the map, but they are such an afterthought that you really don't have to bother looking out for them. If you do get trapped by one, you can probably survive. Very rarely they ever kill me, and they aren't anything special. They are one of the only obstacles that are supposed to be a challenge. Unlike radiation, however, they are such little threat that it makes me wonder why everyone likes them, considering how little they do in the game. And that's all I have to say about it. Anomalies are not interesting, and just like the rest of the game, they are annoying. Now, how's the level design going? To be honest, there's nothing good or bad about it. For the most part, the design of the game works. One thing that does come to mind is how the enemies blend into the background, or rather how sometimes the plants don't make me see a fucking thing. Besides that, there's not much to say. Instead, I would like to take this opportunity to talk about quests. You see, in S.T.A.L.K.E.R, there's a minimap right to the left of the screen, and in it always tells you where to go with an arrow. Now, the arrow itself is not very specific to where you have to go, but does the job just good enough to follow it. Sometimes the arrow will disappear for some reason, but you can find your way forward. The game is linear after all, though there were times where this became a little bit of an issue, but more of that later. While we are discussing quests, S.T.A.L.K.E.R has a funny way to do them. The main quest is straightforward, but the side quests are honestly strange. If you have played this game, and for whatever reason you run into, let's say, some bandits, and the game tells you to come back for a reward, even if you haven't accepted anything, that's because the game actually puts all the side quests as active. It's the reason why every time I went into the garbage level, the bandits will spawn over and over again, even if you kill them. The game does this with every quest, for some reason, and pretty much every time I did this, I will ignore it, depending on who made the quest, since backtracking is annoying, especially since this game doesn't have any way to quick travel or any shortcuts. I honestly doubt the developers did this in some kind of intentional way. Even something as simple as quests are done in a really not very normal way. Atmosphere. This is a word that is thrown around a lot, not just in S.T.A.L.K.E.R, but in games in general. The atmosphere of Half-Life is breathtaking, blah blah blah. You get the point. That kind of nonsense. Now, I don't mind that people like atmosphere in games. I'm more so annoyed that no one ever seems to actually understand how to fucking talk.
What really stands out to me is the environment. S.T.A.L.K.E.R is chock full of atmosphere. The weather effects it has impressed me even today. I really like some of the mutant designs and the exoskeletons look cool, but the scenery is just so immersive.
Get to the weather and the time of day. Rainstorms and lightning add a hell of a lot of atmosphere. Surprise, surprise. They can help.
Holds up visually. A big part of what makes walking around the zone immersive and atmospheric is the care put into the environments and the sometimes down.
The definition of atmosphere reads as such: the pervading tone or mood of a place, situation, or work of art. And Google even gave me an example. The hotel is famous for its friendly, welcoming atmosphere. So as you can see, people don't know how to actually describe things. If I were to talk about the atmosphere of S.T.A.L.K.E.R, it will be something to the effect of: the atmosphere was gloomy and scary, but people can't even do something as basic as using the word atmosphere, because God forbid you explain what you mean and use examples of it. Other than that, I don't have anything in particular to say about the atmosphere of S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Some people find the game to be scary, but this is as much of a horror game as Resident Evil 4. In which I mean there's not much of horror in it. It's much more focused on action. While there are enemies that you consider to be horror-like, whatever the fuck that means, they are not only pretty rare, they are also not much of a threat. There is one enemy that comes to mind, that being the enemy that is essentially invisible, but they only surprise you if, well, they actually manage to be sneaky, which they are really not. A lot of the times I would see them coming from a mile away. Sometimes they sort of didn't even move until I shoot at them. Look, the point I'm making here is that there's not much to offer in terms of horror. Not from the enemies, not from the way the game works, and not much from the story and setting. I'm not asking the game to jumpscare me. It's just clearly that the game is having a lot of more focus on the action part than the horror part, which is just another part of this odd puzzle that are reviewers when they talk about S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Another thing that people seem to really like about S.T.A.L.K.E.R is the story. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it, the story is not great. Not that this is a first for me, no, all the time I hear people praise mediocre stories in games. And for today, we'll focus on S.T.A.L.K.E.R from the very beginning. You start with a cutscene where a truck is driving a bunch of dead bodies. These are called death trucks and appear to carry dead bodies, all except for one body, that being you the player. After the vehicle is struck by lightning, hours later an anonymous individual comes to save you from the village. He goes on to say, "This one seems to be alive. What a lucky guy." Not really sure why he talks to himself, but whatever. He then carries you all the way to I might just call him Chicken Man. This very nice savior tells Chicken Man that you have the mark, and also that you're still alive. And he is shocked to hear this for some reason. I bring this up because the death trucks as a whole make no fucking sense. You see, death trucks, or DT for short, exist to infiltrate the bodies they carry into S.T.A.L.K.E.R factions in order to carry on certain missions given to them in a PDA. So why will Chicken Man be shocked to hear you're alive? Simple. He shouldn't. I think this cutscene was written with a different intention. Rather than to make the DT carry brainwashed people, they must have just been a regular truck that carries dead bodies. This will explain all the dialogue we see of the characters being surprised to see you, well, alive. It also explains the name of the trucks and why they are only mentioned twice in the entire game. Once at the beginning and once at the very end. At the end of the game, they tell you pretty much what I just said. That they take people and hack their brains, and that they send those people out, but because the survival rate is so low, they are called death trucks, which is very stupid. For one, the main antagonists already have people working for them. They are called the Monolith, and you meet them later on. I assume they don't have a mortality rate because that will be very stupid. And second, they send these trucks all the way to the outer zone, which is also stupid considering that this goes against what they want, which is to kill S.T.A.L.K.E.R, and he's close to the center. There are even more things to bring up, but for now let's keep going. Chicken Man then sees your PDA, and is about to give the man a prize for your life, for some reason I guess. But just then you wake up for a second, and take the PDA that says kill the S.T.A.L.K.E.R, and you go back to sleep. Now, let's have a little discussion regarding this PDA, because just like the rest of the story, it makes little sense. You see, that PDA is not yours, but it is given to you specifically so that you hunt S.T.A.L.K.E.R. But later on, you find out that S.T.A.L.K.E.R is actually you. So you might wonder, why the fuck would the bad guys then give you the PDA? Well, the wiki over here just says that they actually did this as a mistake, but I don't really understand how. What is essentially a powerful mind made of multiple people that can straight up change reality and do such a stupid mistake. Even if they didn't know S.T.A.L.K.E.R, something I don't believe is possible anyway, was given the mission, how do they expect him to do the mission anyway? You just put it in a PDA and call it a day? Mind you, while they can't brainwash people, S.T.A.L.K.E.R himself has full amnesia, so he doesn't remember anything. And for the rest of the game, he just wants to know what's going on, rather than to, well, kill himself. In this case, of course, the reason for all of this is just to make an excuse of the story, which just becomes a stupid contrivance. But let's move on. Once S.T.A.L.K.E.R wakes up, he talks more to Chicken Man, and he tells him that he's the only person he's seen with the tattoo S.T.A.L.K.E.R. That's S.T.A.L.K.E.R. that has survived the Deathstrokes. We've already went over why this is so stupid, so moving on. Chicken Man then tells you to do a rescue mission. A guy named Nimble that has a flash drive with important information. After that, he tells you some information about S.T.A.L.K.E.R. That his group is the only one that has made it to the center of the zone, and that the Wish Granter, which is a magical device that gives you wishes, isn't there too. Now time to break the obvious question. Why does nobody recognize your S.T.A.L.K.E.R? Well, to be honest, there's no real answer to this that I could find. Most fans just chalk it up to, well, you're a super lonely secret type. They assume that S.T.A.L.K.E.R is for whatever reason made of air. Now the reason for this is quite simple. It's just another big contrivance. Because the only person alive that recognizes you is your teammate that you always see right before the end of the game. The game gives you that sweet twist that is actually kind of stupid. I mean, for crying out loud, S.T.A.L.K.E.R is a nobody, except he's so famous that he's the only guy to have reached the nuclear power plant and come back alive. This information can't come from nowhere. After all, people have to know he not only exists, but what he's doing, or where he is, or I don't know, what he fucking looks like. But yes, this is dumb. Moving on. Once Chicken Man tells you that everyone wants to get into the center, which is the power plant, but is unable due to something called the brain scorcher, which melts your brain or something. For some reason they know the fact that the brain scorcher not only exists, but also that they attack the brains and can even be turned off. So basically they know everything but can't stop it for reasons. After that he tells you to steal some documents from the military and bring them to the barkeep. Not sure why him, but whatever. He also mentions a guy named Fox that might have info about S.T.A.L.K.E.R. And this is when I realized something about S.T.A.L.K.E.R. You see, S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow Chernobyl wants to pad out the time. So what it does is that it tells you to find a person, only for you to find another person, and then another person, and so on. No one really tells you anything interesting or something that you really want to know. So it becomes a waste of time, which is exactly what the game wants to do. I don't really care much for it, but since I never got into the story at all. However, consider how much people praise this game's story, it really says a lot about it. After helping Fox, you then have to help some guy named S.T.A.L.K.E.R for reasons. He then tells you, you guessed it, about another stalker named Mo that you also have to help. Anyway, after saving Mo, he tells you to go underground to find S.T.A.L.K.E.'s hideout. Something that's funny about this is that later on in the story, you'll find a guy named Doctor that tells you the truth of the player being S.T.A.L.K.E.R. However, at this point in the game, he is nowhere to be found, despite him being your teammate, and he's not on your hideout for some reason. Another contrivance, oh boy. After finding your hideout and steal the documents from the military, you go back to the barkeep. He then gives you more useless information and directs you to a laboratory known as Lab X18. Unfortunately, the barkeep only has one of the keys, and you need to get the other one by doing a rescue mission. Yay, more filler. After doing another rescue mission, you go into Lab X18, where you learn about experiments on PSI emissions, aka psychic nonsense. After the lab, you go back to Chicken Man, and he gives you another mission to retrieve information, this time literally around the corner. Stupidity aside, it's always close by. After more backtracking, you go to meet the barman once again. He tells you that the brain scorcher is man-made. And, well, of course it's man-made. What the fuck else would it be? Anyway, he tells you about another secret lab, X16, so you know what's next. You make your way into the wild territory, that's what it's called, where you have to do an escort mission for a scientist, man. Nothing important as usual. After rescuing him, you reach Yantar. You then meet another scientist that gives you a mission. Turns out there's another PSI emitter that exists in Lab 16. There's a few things to talk about. For starters, how the fuck do people know about this? It's supposed to be a secret lab with secret experiments, but just like the rest of the game, they just casually talk about it. I mean, for crying out loud. It's a PSI freaking mind-bending abilities, and it's said like we're supposed to know what that even is. We also learned that the enemies in the area are zombified. No, that is not a joke, that's what they're called. Actual zombies, and no, they're not zombies. They're just human, that for some reason their brains have been melted so bad that they just stand there and shoot at you. They don't really act like zombies, nor do they eat meat or anything, as a matter of fact. I have no idea what the intention is with these guys, besides just having a new type of enemy. Oddly enough, while they are far from zombies, you do indeed have to shoot them in the head to kill them. I wonder if they were planned to be actual zombies, but changed their minds at the last second. But regardless, these enemies stand out a lot. And while the idea of enemies being created by a monster machine of some kind, it just doesn't make sense. How the fuck do these things live? In the zone of all places. They have to eat unless they're just corpses, but remember, their mind is being hacked, so they don't have some kind of unkillable virus like zombie stories do. Anyway, dumb zombies aside, you'll make your way into the lab and shut down the stupid PSI emitter. You also get another cutscene with S.T.A.L.K.E.R, and I think it's time to talk about it. In this cutscene, you see the doctor, a guy that helps you out, but doesn't really travel with you for some reason. He talks about the picture you just gave him, where you got it from, and why you want to go to the north so bad. There's no answer to the picture, and it doesn't matter. It's just a red herring. In fact, most of the game is a red herring, but let's move on. S.T.A.L.K.E.R also never tells the doctor why he wants to go to the power plant. But it should be like, I don't know, pretty obvious that everyone keeps going there. There's an entire faction dedicated to stopping you from going north. Yes, this is a stupid question, but the doctor is like, why are you going north? I don't know. Isn't that like where everyone wants to go, genius? After that, you see S.T.A.L.K.E.R and Doc's house? I'm not sure, but anyway, he also says, if you only knew where I've been and what I saw. After this dialogue, we're made to believe that he straight up didn't tell him. What? In the scene itself, S.T.A.L.K.E.R is holding what I'm assuming is an artifact. However, this doesn't matter. This Pokeball, or whatever it is never brought up again or mentioned. The doctor mentions that things will go bad for him, and they do. After which, the doctor takes care of him. Now, we know that S.T.A.L.K.E.R has a crew, but we never see them in any of these scenes. The only one we ever see is Doc over here. Which begs the question of where the fuck are they? Did they just get lazy and didn't include them in the cutscenes? In any case, the scene ends with S.T.A.L.K.E.R saying he wants to go to the north. Now let's bring some obvious stuff. For one, we don't know why our main character never seems to realize that he looks like S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Mind you, this is not a silly perspective problem. No. What we see is very much what S.T.A.L.K.E.R sees. I can confirm this by looking at the PDA journal. For some reason, S.T.A.L.K.E.R never seems to realize that he's S.T.A.L.K.E.R. It's not like he has the memory of a goldfish. He should know what he looks like. Not to mention, he's seen what are his own memories. With the odd exception of a doctor, because that makes no sense. But it's just stupidity by the story as usual. Second point being, why does S.T.A.L.K.E.R never seem to acknowledge that he's seeing the memories not of his own? Remember, he's unaware of his own identity, but for some reason he never questions why he's seeing what he's seeing. I can once again confirm this by looking at his journal, which just tells us what we already saw. After this nonsense, S.T.A.L.K.E.R finds his body ghost, or rather his corpse, because he was killed by a controller. Can't blame him honestly. I like these things more than once. You learned that he was supposed to meet with Guide. Yeah, that's his name, Guide. Yeah, no, the naming convention in this game is truly spectacular. Next up, you go to this guide that just tells you to find Doc in your hideout. Not sure why he's there, only now, but whatever. One funny thing I noticed is Guy himself. Since I'm making this video, I investigated the wiki in order to look for information. Turns out Guy here is the first stalker ever. Well, at least that's what some say. It also mentions how, if he likes you enough, he can take you anywhere in the zone, to the point that he can even get past the brain scorcher. Which begs the question, how does nobody else seems to know this? I mean, if he was part of S.T.A.L.K.E.'s gang and only helped them, that will make some sense. But that's not true. He can help anybody. So, is nobody spilling the beans on how to get past the brain? Or is everyone just stupid? I mean, there has to be other people, other than him, that can get past it. We know that S.T.A.L.K.E. himself made it multiple times to the center, despite the brain scorcher still being a problem. Which means that he must have used Guide's help at least once, though as before, he only exists for you to quite literally guide you to Doc. Once you get into your hideout, you get knocked out again. But this cutscene happens in-game for some reason. Not sure why. Anyway, why did Doc booby trap the place? Like, this wasn't there before, and now all of a sudden it is? Why? It seems like people already know the location anyway, so why bother? Oh, is it because you want to knock out the player? As usual? Probably. In any case, he tells the Mark 1 that he's S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Wow, holy crap. What a twist. Yeah, no, to be honest, this means nothing to me. Even if this twist was executed well, this doesn't really shock me at all. For one, finding S.T.A.L.K.E.R was our main mission. We are so far ahead of that nonsense, you end up forgetting about it. This quest is technically optional after all, but it is a main quest. since the quest doesn't have a timer. And if you do ignore it, the game will take a giant dump on your face. So for now, let's just keep it in mind. Anyway, Doc also says that the wish granter is a scam. The only reason he says this is because apparently you came to the conclusion that the genie, aka the wish granter, must be fake. I'm not sure why S.T.A.L.K.E.R draws this conclusion, especially since in the cutscenes he's clearly desperate to reach it, which makes it even more bizarre, because Doc himself says he has always been desperate to understand the secret of the song. But that cutscene completely contradicts this. I'm assuming this is all because the developers are trying to guide the player into the right path. S.T.A.L.K.E.R could also simply think that something that grants wishes must be a lot of bullshit, since apparently from the start he never cared for it. But that's the thing, no one has ever reached the wish granter, so he can't know this for certain, even if it seems impossible. Remember, the zone is quite literally the land of the impossible, so I don't know why he would think this, without some kind of document that gives him a better picture of the whole thing. Not to mention, Doc also tells you where to get the decoder, a magic key that will open the hidden path to the bad guys of the game. Once again, how did S.T.A.L.K.E.R get this information? And also, where did he get such a decoder? The only information we get about them is that Ghost has 2 of them for some reason. I guess we assume he stole them or something, I don't know. After more talking with the barkeep, you go into the Red Forest, where you start fighting the Monolith. They are one of the main antagonistic factions that want to stop you from entering the nuclear plant. We don't get much information on them, besides the fact that they are a cult and that they will stop anyone coming close to the plant. Now let's quickly talk about these guys. They are, as said before, fanatics. The brain scorcher brainwashes anyone that comes close to it, and once they fall, they become part of the monolith. Now what's the difference between them and the S.T.A.L.K.E.R infiltrators? Nothing, besides that one seems to have a mortality rate for some reason, which begs the question, how did they get so many people in the first place? Remember, they can only get people if they don't become zombies, and the whole point of the monolith is to drive away people. So how do you get more people if you are going out of your way to kill them? See what I mean? This makes no sense at all. They will never be able to recruit people. Hell, if anything, you want people to come into the center to gather an army. Even if you don't want to create an army, you still need people running around to do your tasks for you. Monolith aside, you make it to the brain scorcher and turn it off. Everyone is aware of this somehow, and they are all making their way to the plant. With the help of a few people, you make it to Pripyat's hotel, where you find the decoder to open the super secret door with the true ending. Later on, you finally make your way to the nuclear power plant. Inside this hellish place, you go into the secret lab and meet Common Consciousness, or CC for short. They are the main antagonists of the game, and once you reach them, you get all the answers to the song. Except, you don't really, but getting ahead of ourselves. CC explains how the sun was created. It all started when the Soviet Union was making experiments about psychic nonsense. This was created after the nuclear explosion, and they made a base inside of it. because apparently that will stop anyone from coming close. So much for that. In any case, after the USSR dissolved, the experiments continue. And finally, they found something called the noosphere, an invisible field that can affect human thoughts. And apparently, they were planning to use it to make world peace. While nice on principle, sadly, this went off the rails quite fast. Once the hive mind known as CC was created, they then decided to experiment with the noosphere. This, however, did not go as planned, and after the second attempt, made a rift in it and started creating what we know now as the zone. Now, I know this is all sci-fi stuff, but how in the hell does the barrier that is used to affect our consciousness create what are essentially these bizarre patches of acid, fire, electricity? You get the idea. This thing is supposed to affect our minds, and yet all they did was make a hole that just makes random death traps and nothing else. When I first got into the game, I was under the impression this zone was created by radiation. I mean, some of the anomalies look like they could be done with radiation, but as it turns out, this has nothing to do with that. As a matter of fact, the setting is just an excuse to make it seem more mysterious. And also because the plot of this game was taken from a movie with also the same name. Can't really say if this is a good thing or not. And also, no, I will not talk about the movie or the book it was inspired on, because they don't really matter. Now, CC did try to fix this, or even contain it to some extent. But after everyone started noticing the zone, they all came to invade it. From the military, from random people looking to cash in. Now, I get this thing is super secretive, but why would CC just not ask for help after this? When you fuck up so bad that you're making the Earth bend the rules of the universe, you should really do something about that. But no, for some reason, CC decided it was better to basically brainwash people and even attack them in order to protect themselves from it. Something even more stupid is how they created the wish granter. You know, a way to get rid of people and brainwash them. Except it also creates a legend that encourages anyone that comes close. So really, only thing stopping S.T.A.L.K.E.R and everyone else is just a door. When S.T.A.L.K.E.R made his way last time, they managed to knock him out and brainwash him. Except for some reason, he ends up with amnesia. CC is also completely unaware he is S.T.A.L.K.E.R too. Now, if S.T.A.L.K.E.R doesn't have some kind of identity, or at least assuming he could have a PDA or anything, but whatever, CC should still be aware that few people, especially alone, could make it to the nuclear power plant, so the chances of him being S.T.A.L.K.E.R shouldn't be that low. But regardless, they have no idea he's S.T.A.L.K.E.R. While they have the ability to brainwash him, they do not have access to his memories, despite literally making a hole in the fabric of the universe. And then they just gave him a PDA that tells him to kill himself. The amount of CC shooting themselves in the foot is so big that you basically have no leg left. And that's it. Yep, that's all CC explains. You can ask them other questions, but they don't tell you anything new. Now, this is not going to be the last time I talk about CC, but keep them in mind for the time. After this whole discussion, CC gives you a choice. join them, or refuse. If you join them, it's pretty much what you expect. You just get into a random tank or whatever and become part of CC. But if you refuse, you get teleported outside. Not sure why or how, but at this point it is the least of the game's problems. You then make your way into various teleporters, because why not? Until you finally reach the end. You see a cutscene where S.T.A.L.K.E.R pretty much shoots CC, and their lives are over. And after that, she goes outside, and the zone is over. Let's just get into it. Why the fuck does the zone disappear? The game explains that yes, CC made the zone, but CC is also trying to fix the problem, although in a very poor way. When they contain the zone, it starts to get too much energy, and they have to release it from time to time. Note that if they didn't contain the zone, the world will be slowly affected by it. I confirmed all this information from the wiki itself. And so knowing this, how the hell does the zone disappear? The only way this could make sense is if the problem of the noosphere was fixed, or almost fixed. But CC in their delusion would then refuse to let go of the zone, affecting everyone, and so S.T.A.L.K.E.R puts it to an end. But no, the game can't even get this right. It's very poorly written and explained. Let's make one thing clear. Before we go into the next topic, a lot of people love the world building of S.T.A.L.K.E.R, but let's be honest here, there's not much world building. Everything I just told you is everything you need to know. There is nothing new when it comes to information. In your PDA, you get lots and lots of entries and information about characters and just random information on stuff. And a lot, if I'm being honest, pretty much all of it is useless. You never learn anything new or useful that the game hasn't already told you. Everything it tells you is a waste of time. Seriously, you don't need to bother reading anything because all of it is meaningless. They are there, just fill the game. In fact, everything about the story is the same way. The brain sculpture doesn't really matter, and there's no explanation or origin to explain the factions of the game. They don't matter at all, besides getting some specific endings that don't really matter because they're literally fake. Everything you do is in order to get to the center, but S.T.A.L.K.E.R has already done it, so they makes you do it. Except, characters like Guy don't exist. A lot of this game, just padding. Get some documents? Thanks, bro. Here's some more useless information. Find someone that might know S.T.A.L.K.E.R? Nah, they just give you someone else. Or the person is dead by the time you get there. You get the garbage, find more in another area, get useless documents, find even more documents in a lab while doing more optional stuff, like rescuing people, rescue more people, meet a scientist, go all the way back to the beginning, get more documents, find another lab, shut down the brain, go to another city, yada yada. You get the idea. It's all useless filler. Your PDA is useless information. The game is extremely linear, with no meaningful side content. And finally, once you get the answers, they all suck and give you almost nothing. This game has some terrible writing, with nothing but huge amounts of wasting your time. Not a single NPC gives you any meaningful dialogue. You can only ask them something interesting, and even then, it's just about loot or just useless information. and everything else is just asking for quests. There's nothing to NPC's dialogue. Absolutely nothing. Now this section will be more of a recap, and I thought it would be a great chance to show you what I have personally experienced in the game, give you a little more perspective, and the reason why I made this video. You see, when I first started S.T.A.L.K.E.R, I was going completely blind, and I knew this was an older game. However, I decided to give it a chance, and I did not enjoy it at all. As a matter of fact, I ended up dropping it. But despite that, I did make it as far as Yantar, which is about half the game. This did change, however, after S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 was announced. Regardless of me playing that, I decided to finally beat this game, once and for all. So I started a new game, all the way from the beginning, and I hated it. I thought maybe it was some kind of bias, but no. After playing the game for longer, and even managing to beat it in master difficulty, I did not enjoy it. I was very disappointed. But a thought came into my mind. I must be missing something. I mean, I can't be the only one that doesn't like this game. But then I looked up Steam reviews and see that they're all very positive. And this isn't unique to Steam. The game itself has a very high rating on Metacritic. This is clearly a beloved game. I must be doing something wrong, right? Well, that's the thing. I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. And after finally beating the game, I realized that people just do not understand that this game is very poorly developed. And I even went out of my way to watch videos on S.T.A.L.K.E.R. And guess what? All of them are positive. And while some do in fact call the game a little rough at the beginning, they don't go nearly enough in depth about the mechanics and the war. So I decided to finally take the helmet to make this video and hopefully get the word around that this game is not nearly as good as people think it is. To do this, I needed to get footage. And most of what you're watching is actually my master difficulty playthrough, because I hate myself. And I knew that I needed to play the game at least once more in order to get a full perspective on it. However, this will not be the last time I would beat the game. In fact, I beat this game a total of 3 times. I did not record the first time. The second and third time, however, I recorded most of it. And the third time I beat it was just getting some extra footage, while also confirming my thoughts on the mechanics. So yeah, I played this game a lot. If you're wondering why I played this game on master difficulty, it was to see the difference. At one point I thought changing it back, but because it made no difference at all, I decided to keep it. Now let's talk a little bit about my master run. I started the game pretty normally, but I also wanted to see if I could play more stealthily. I got a silence gun and went to town. After a little while, this didn't go anywhere, but I kept the gun. Another thing to mention is that I never use left click to aim, because I cannot tell what I'm shooting at unless I have a sight. This combined with the gunplay make killing enemies from a distance pretty much impossible, so I stopped. I then discovered a tunnel with some anomalies, but I died a few times trying to get past it. The way getting up over anomalies in this game is not very intuitive. Sometimes I throw a bolt and it activates, or at times it doesn't. Sometimes it takes a little while to come back, and there's no really way to tell. but it doesn't matter anyway, because you can skip it. Now obviously, since this is master mode, I did some quests that I never bothered doing, and they were what you expect, a waste of time. Then I had some trouble with some bandits, it went about as well as you think. Once you get past the nonsense, I started using a rifle, and this is where people get the misconception that rifles are actually accurate. They're not, but we already talked about it. Another thing to mention is loot. I kept trying to get lots of guns and other stuff in order to sell it, but you really don't need to do this, like at all. In fact, you get so little money from it that it's better to pick up other stuff, like artifacts, and sell them to the scientists on Yantar. One gun I like using a lot is the modified AK-74, because it shoots so fast it drops enemies like they're flies. No matter the one, I always use it. By far the most reliable one, before the sniper rifle. Despite suffering early on, I didn't struggle as much after the beginning, due to my AK. However, I still had some. From when my armor would get worse and worse, and by the time I noticed, it was already damaged in half. I would try using other guns, they just weren't as good. Oddly enough, the zombies in this game are more accurate than you would think, to the point that they will kill me from time to time. At some point I realized you can heal instantly without opening the inventory, so it did help a lot. However, even with this in mind, once I got to the brain scorcher, I started to struggle again. This is due to enemy placement in it, as they don't move until they see you. Even if you try to take them down, they will kill you much faster. This is a game where you have to save off them, otherwise it's back to your last save. This part in particular is infuriating, as sometimes they will just stand still. Even if you're careful, you can get very unlucky. Sometimes the enemy will rush so fast that you don't even have time to react. Other times they just come out of nowhere. Sometimes they don't even react until you shoot. Sometimes they just straight up kill you, even when you take cover. You get the point. Things get real rough in Master, especially on this level. Now it's not like you can beat it, but when you start saving every 5 minutes, it just takes away from the challenge. And at this point, I'm not going to let myself suffer anymore. Anyway, after all of that, and some more, I actually had to restart to a previous save file, due to a fuck up on a mission. And due to that fucked up, I ended up getting locked out of sniper ammo, so I went back. Now let's just skip to the power plant. This part sucks. I try my best at doing it, but you just cannot fight in it. No matter what, a helicopter in the sky will kill you. So it's much better to just rush your way into the power plant. Believe me, I tried to do it, but some of the helicopters would not go down no matter what, and I got sick of trying. One other thing I would like to mention is how unfair bazookas are. Seriously, you cannot do anything about this unless you know ahead of time, and you cannot survive them. They shoot these things so fast, even when I took cover, the damage is so high, I will still die to this thing. Once you're inside the power plant, it's not too bad, but then it just escalates the difficulty to straight up unfair. There were times I would die by getting shot through a wall, and during this point there will be so many enemies that just trying to peek at them could get me killed, which was awful to say the least. And nothing is a better example of this problem than the Hall of Doom. This hall is the worst. Even in S.T.A.L.K.E.R difficulty, it can be a real pain. This haul alone shows how unfair the game can be at times. For one, you're getting shot from 3 different angles. 2 of them have enemies that you can barely see on the dark, if you do spot them. The other ones are behind some kind of red cage, and the enemy, for whatever reason, either just stands there like an idiot, or it just does not stop moving at all. So when this is happening, you can try your best to hide from one angle, but no matter what, you will get shot from either the front or the back. It took me many tries and quick saving to get out of this hellhole of a level. After all the nonsense, you go to the finale, that is just following portals and killing enemies. At some point I got sick of killing enemies, so I started to run to the portals before I could die. And that was my second run of S.T.A.L.K.E.R. This playthrough only served to further get me mad at S.T.A.L.K.E.R. The fact that people, especially back in the day, will recommend you to play and master is absurd. For one, difficulty goes up, and your accuracy stays the same. The myth of getting better and even taking down enemies faster is nothing short of a stupid lie that got traction. So if you do plan on playing this game, do not play on master difficulty. Believe me, you will hate yourself. As said before, this wasn't my last run. I did went back to the game one more time, mostly to see if I was going crazy. When I started the game, I noticed I was getting more accurate than I thought, but then I realized I was just getting lucky and shooting way too close at the enemy. Since this was S.T.A.L.K.E.R mode, I didn't die much, but I still quick save a decent amount, and yes, I still died a few times. So if anything, while I did get better at the game, I still found it to be more of a personal improvement than the actual game. But it doesn't matter at this point. I've gone above and beyond, and I think it's time to put it on an end. In conclusion, how is S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow Chernobyl doing? Well, we talk about the consistent shooting, the horrible AI and difficulty, stealth that just doesn't exist, level design that is mediocre, a nonsensical story full of holes with little to no explanation or expansion on anything. There's nothing open world about the game either. It is very linear. All side content are just shitty side quests about killing something or getting something. All the lore or information you get in your PDA is worthless. You can't even loot like a normal game. You can't even shoot like a normal game. Hell, you can't even get the credits right. For crying out loud, I don't know why this happens. This game needs an update. Not only because some people can't even play the game, but because they should have fixed it a long time ago. Seriously, when even the credits are broken, you should do something about it. But that's the thing. When you play the game, which in this footage you see, it is 1.006, which is insane. I don't know the number of updates, but it really does show how little they care about this game. But sadly, this does not matter. No one, and I mean no one, cares about the quality of the game. Hell, for all I know, this game was worse. But no, people really like this game and claim it's janky. But that's just not true. Jank is not the word. The word jank has no meaning on this game. S.T.A.L.K.E.R is not a good game. Everything I've talked about is to show how poorly thought out and implemented everything is. There is so much filler and so much meaningless nonsense that people excuse because the game looks pretty and feels immersive which to me means nothing. S.T.A.L.K.E.R could be the most immersive game ever, and I will still shit on it as much as I do here. This game sucks. There's nothing else. It's just really mediocre to bad mechanics. And no one cares. Not one single video has gone nearly enough in depth about this game's mechanics or even the story. The shooting, for example, it's always chalked up to it's bad early on, but it gets better later, which just isn't true. And even if it was the case, that would not excuse it. The gunplay should always be good, and if it's not, then at least give it an update, but they clearly never will. They can't even bother making a remaster or remake either. And the best people have are mods, and I think it's really sad. No one plays Bioshock and say they should mod it, because Bioshock doesn't need mods. Doesn't need it to fix itself or to make it enjoyable. This attitude only happens with bad games. And while this is a small studio, it has seen so much success. And somehow this game has been abandoned. And it continues to trick any new players with its score and praise. But guess what? That means nothing to me. S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow of Chernobyl is a bad game. Don't play it. Phew. Now that it's finally over, I think it's time to wrap it up. I wasn't planning on making this video, or hell, even any other video. However, the reviews really got to me. So much so that I knew I had to do it, because no one else would. Not even the people that praise this game going in as much in depth as I do. And honestly, I think that says a lot about it. They look S.T.A.L.K.E.R as this incredible immersive experience, when in reality it's just a mediocre game at best. But people let themselves get influenced fairly easy. And even now, S.T.A.L.K.E.R is being talked like one of the greatest games ever. I was under the impression that S.T.A.L.K.E.R was a stealth game, but there is no stealth. There's nothing. So hopefully this video can at least change some of the public perception of the game. It took me quite a while to make, and this is my first video ever. So hopefully, regardless of what you think, I hope you enjoy it. If you agree or disagree with me in any way, let me know down in the comments. But for now, see you later, and have a great day.